In question 17, we're given pairs of numbers and we're asked to circle the larger number. Now here you have a mixed number. So let's write that down. Mixed number. All that means is you have a whole part and a fraction part. Now, what I like to do with this question is I like to see it like this. So this is all going on in my head. So between the whole part and the fraction part, you have the decimal point. So it's 1 point half. Right, so all this is going in your head. 1 point half. Now the question is, what is half as a decimal? So you have half here. And what is that as a decimal? And we all know it's 0.5. And this is one fact you need to learn. Now, if we're careful, we can add this to this one. So what we have is this one plus this 0.5. So remember, all this is going on in my head. 0.5. And if you notice, I put the 0 in the ones column. So now what I'm going to do is put the decimal point there to the right and add a helper 0. Now if I add the first column, 0 add 5 is 5. Bring the decimal point down very carefully and line it up. And then 1 add 0 is 1. So my answer is 1.5. Now if you're very careful and you practice, you will know that you can put this straight into there. So this 0.5 will go there, 0.5. So this half will disappear and you'll end up with 1.5. So we have 1.5 here and we need to compare it to 1.2. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to line these two up. 1.2 and 1.5. Now if I want to compare these two, I always start from the left. So let me do this. That is the ones column. That is the decimal point. And this here is the tenths column. I'm going to put a lowercase t. And t just stands for tenths. And sometimes you'll see it written as 1/10. So now always start from the left. So these two are both the same. So we move on to the tenths column. And we look that the 2 and the 5 are there. And the 5 is bigger. So this number is the larger number. So we can circle the 1.5. In this part of the question, we have 1.25 and 1.3. And remember what we said about this, that is a mixed number. So let's write that again. Where you have a whole part and a fraction part. And what did we say we can do with this? We can put in a decimal point. Now ask yourself, this fraction part, what is that as a decimal? So what is 1/4 as a decimal? And this is a fact you need to learn. It is 0.25. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to write the whole part here. 1 point, and this fraction part I'm going to write here. So 1.25 is 1.25. This is the ones column. This is the tenths column. And this here is the hundredths column. So T is the tenths column. And sometimes you will see it written as 1/10. That is 1/10. And the H is the hundredths column. And that's written as 1 over 100. Now we need to compare 1.25 with 1.3. So let's write those here. Now if you notice, this has got 2 decimal places and this has only got 1. So what we can do is put a helper 0 to help us compare the numbers. Now let's start from the left again. These two are both 1s, so we move on to the tenths column. Now we can see 2 is smaller than 3, so 3 is the bigger number here. So we know that 1.3 is bigger than 1.25. So this is 1.25 because we worked that out here, and this is 1.3. And we know 1.3 is bigger, so we'll circle this number. In the third part of question 17, we're given 1 and 5 100ths and 1.4. So what we can do is turn this into a decimal. So we have 1 and 5 100ths. And as before, if we put the decimal point there, so it'll be 1 point something. Now the question is, what is this as a decimal? I can use the bus shelter, 5 over 100. It's raining and 5 is getting wet. Now I'm going to build a bus shelter, and this 5 has to go inside to stay dry. Now this 100 has to go outside. Now I'm going to put the decimal point after the 5 because that's where the decimal point is. Also, all this is in your head as well. So I'm going to copy this up here so then I don't make any mistakes or lose the decimal point. And now 5, we need to put a few helper zeros. So we'll put a 0 here and a 0 here as a helper. Now the question is, how many 100s are there in this 5? There's 0. So what I'm going to do is carry this 5 over because it's like a remainder. So I have 5 there. So this 0 now becomes 50. How many 100s can I get from 50? I've not got enough, so I got 0. Now carefully I carry this 50 over, this 5 and this 0 over to this. So I end up with 500. So read this very carefully, 500. So it's 5, 0, which I've carried over from there. And there's this 0 here, so it's 500. How many 100s are there in 500? So if I count up in 100s until I get to 500, so it's 100, 200, 300, 400 and 500. So there's 5 lots of 100. So I can put 5 here, and because there's no remainder I can stop. So 5 100ths is 0.05. Now what I can do is finish this off. So I have 1 point, and then if I look carefully here, 0.5. 0.5. Now what I can do is I can compare this decimal with this. So let me write these numbers here. 1.4 and 1 point, and I have to be careful, it's 0.5. 0.5. Now if I look here, I have 1 decimal place there, but I have 2 decimal places here. So what I can do up here is add a helper 0. So now I have 2 decimal places and 2 decimal places. So as before, I start on the left and I compare this column. So I've got a 1 there and a 1 there. They're both the same. So what I do is I move on to the next column. So I compare this column here, which is the tenths. I have a 4 there and a 0 there. 4 is bigger, so I know that this number here is bigger than this number. And that number has come from there. And this number has come from there. So I can circle 1.4 because 1.4 is bigger than 1 and 5/100ths. In the last part of the question, we're asked to compare 1 and 3/5 and 1.5, and we know that's a mixed number. So I'm going to write this as 1.3/5. Now I need to find out what 3/5 is as a decimal. Now I want you to learn 1/5 is 0.2. So if 1/5 is 0.2, 3/5 will be 3 of these. So I can do 0.2 plus 0.2 plus 0.2. So I can add 3 of these. Let's start here. 2 plus 2 plus 2 is 6. Now carefully line up the decimal point, and 0 at 0 at 0 is simply 0. So I now know that 3/5 is 0.6. Now let me do it another way. 3/5. It's raining. 3's getting wet, so I'm going to build a bus shelter. So let me build it here. So the 3 has to stay dry, it stays in there, and the 5 goes outside. Now as before, I know there's a decimal point here, and I'm going to carefully do a decimal point above where my answer is going to go. Now I'm going to add 2 helpers as 2 zeros. We don't have to use them both, but they're useful being there. Now how many 5s are there in 3? I've not got enough, so I'm going to put a 0. And now I have to carry this over to the next column because it's like a remainder. So I'm going to put the 3 there, and this 0 becomes 30. So now I have 30 here. So how many 5s are there in 30? 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and 30. So how many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So how many 5s are there in 30? There's 6. Now because there's no remainder, we can stop. So our answer is 0.6. Now this number I can write as 1 point, and we know 3/5 is 0.6. So from the decimal point I can put a 6 here. So I know that is 1.6. 1.6. Now I can compare these two numbers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write this number just below it, 1.5. Now I always start on the left. I'm going to compare the ones column where it's 1 and 1, so they're both the same. So now I move on to the tenths column, and I can see that's a 6 and that's a 5, and the 6 is bigger than the 5, so I know this is the bigger number, and that has come from there. So I'll circle this.